Okay, one down, one to go. You've turned in your critical claim major paper. Good for you. That's a huge milestone. That's halfway through the major papers in COM 204. The next one is the rhetoric major paper. It's kind of the capstone for our second unit of the class. And so I'm going to walk you through this assignment as you get prepared for the second and last big paper. I know we're only in the second week of the class, but the class moves ahead pretty quickly. Remember, each day is kind of like a week of the regular semester. So we're already here. You're going to have a little bit of time to work on this one, but I want you to go ahead and get a good early start so that you can get feedback from me, talk to me about your ideas, and be prepared to be successful on this paper. So let's look at this assignment and kind of walk through what is required of you. So it's due next Friday, June 1st, the end of our third week of class, by noon Eastern Daylight Time. And like the first paper, it's about 1,000 words. Here's the big difference. In this paper, we're adding a layer of difficulty by saying that you're still going to make a critical claim about your text, which in this case will be a speech, but you have to do it using a theoretical concept. So that's definitely more difficult. Now, in your thesis statement, you need to have at least one concept or theory, but you don't have to have both of the concepts or theories that you're using in your thesis statement. So you'll have to choose one classical, which means ancient, and one, here's some examples that I've given you in the assignment, and then one contemporary concept. Here are the examples of things that we've talked about in the class. You do have to use something that we've talked about in the class. So you need one of each of those in the paper, but only one of them has to be in your thesis. So you really have two options about how to go about this paper. One is that you could decide that you're going to try to weave both of your concepts into your thesis. And that is okay. If you are willing to do that, willing to try, that's great. So you might say something like, let's imagine that one of your speeches were from President Obama. So you might say, in President Obama's, whatever it was, speech, he uses Burke's identification by association along with Aristotle's ethos to try to convince his audience that he shares their beliefs. So that's one option. You could use both your classical and your contemporary theory in your thesis. What most students do, and you're welcome to do, you can certainly earn a 5 with this approach, is to just pick one of those to be in your thesis statement. So you might say, in President Obama's XYZ speech, he relies on Aristotle's ethos to persuade his audience that he is someone that they can trust and believe in. And then you can use most of your paper to support that concept's argument. And then somewhere near the end of the paper, you might have a paragraph where you say, in addition to using ethos, President Obama also uses Burke's identification by association to show that his audience shares the same values that he has. And so, again, you do have to use one classical and one contemporary theory, but you don't have to have both of them in your thesis statement. Now, this is really important for this assignment. The speech will provide most of your support. So you should quote the speech liberally, and by that I mean a lot. Every paragraph should have a quotation from the speech, at least one, maybe a couple or three, to support your argument about what's happening in the speech, because this is how you're going to support your argument. You're going to say, you know, President Obama uses association, and so then you're going to have to find specific places in the speech where he talks about things that he thinks his audience agrees with him about. So, you know, a bright future for our children, or a safe America, or equal opportunity for all. You know, these are the kinds of things that are associational appeals. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll get to that identification video a little bit later and that'll make sense. But you're going to have to give specific quotes from the speech to show that those concepts are actually at work. Another requirement that is different about this paper is that you will have to do some research and cite your sources. This is why we had, in part, the APA style assignment. It was so that you could get some practice at doing this. Now, what kind of research do you need to do? Well, I would encourage you to use the Communication Mass Media Complete database on the library's website. So if you go through databases, and I think they're alphabetized. You pick the letter C, you go to this one. Anything you find in that database counts as a communication scholarly article, and you do have to have at least one scholarly article as support for your paper. So look there, but it doesn't have to be from there. You might find a historical, if you're looking for background, who was in the audience, what had happened in America leading up to the times of these speeches. You might find something in a biography or in an article about that period of history or that person's administration or something like that. Any of those are fine ways to find your sources. And I don't have specific requirements for how you use them. So most students end up using sources in their introduction as background, or they might use them within the body of their argument, especially if you find a scholarly article that says something that agrees with what you're saying. Then by all means, kind of cite those scholars as supporting your argument. But you don't have to do that if you just want to include some facts, some information about the audience, some information about the speaker, anything that you don't already know, anything that you found out, anything that's not common knowledge, make sure that you cite that. Now, do not cite the speech itself. And I think I have that down here in the list. I'm not sure. But if I don't cite your speech itself. We're treating that as a given. So if you do cite your speech, then of course you have to do it the whole way. You have to have a reference in the reference list. You have to cite each individual quotation. But don't do that. I'm going to assume any quotation comes from the speech you're doing. And I have given you that information. So you will need to choose one of the three speeches that I have provided links to here for you. Nixon's checkered speech, Malcolm X's The Ballad of the Bullet, or Angelina Grimke's address at Pennsylvania Hall back decades before women had the right to vote and when slavery was still a thing in the South in the United States. So these are your options. They're very different. They're from different periods of American history. And pick the one. How would I pick if I were you? I would read through these speeches and see which one seems the most interesting to you. Or which one you think, oh, I have something to say. Or which one you scan the speech and think, oh, that looks like identification right there. Or that looks like a metaphor that I could write about. Or it looks like this person really cares a lot about being credible. That seems like ethos. So, if it's interesting, if you can think of a concept right away, that's probably a good reason to use one of to pick your speech. We will have kind of an intermediate due date of Tuesday, May 29th. In the Blackboard discussion board, you'll need to post the speech you're choosing, a draft of your thesis statement, and I want you to have found your scholarly journal article. Again, not all your sources have to be journal articles. You could use books or chapters or websites from scholars. Those kinds of things are perfectly fine. But one source must be a scholarly journal article. And so I want you to find that by Tuesday, May 29th and post that in APA form on the discussion board so that I know that you've at least gotten a start on your research. The purpose for this is for me to be able to give you feedback and to make sure that you have some time to think about and work on the paper. You're going to be more successful. You're going to end up with a better final paper if you don't put it off until the night before it's due. So this is kind of one way that I'm encouraging you to have good habits there, and you get a point for that as well. About 1,000 words like the first one. These are the requirements again. You got to have a classical concept, got to have a contemporary concept. Do mention, you don't have to go find the original sources for those and cite them, but do mention, if you're using identification, mention Burke. If you're using pathos or logos or ethos, mention Aristotle. If you're talking about how rhetoric is manipulative, mention Plato. Just make sure that you at least, if there's an author for a concept from the videos, make sure that you mention that author. That is a requirement. Direct quotations, again, are your critical support here. Topic sentences in each paragraph should make it clear how that paragraph relates to your thesis. And then for outside sources, you only have to have two. So if you have a journal article and then maybe a part of a biography about your speaker, you can get a 5 with those two sources. So more sources do not equal a better grade. I want you to have sources that help your paper and that you use correctly and cite correctly. So that is the assignment. You're welcome to send me drafts and then call or Skype me to talk about them ahead of time. Again, there are some waypoints along the way where you'll get to submit your ideas and get some feedback. And I encourage you once again to take advantage of the discussion board, see what other people are doing, see what other people's ideas are. Don't just copy them, but they might give you some ideas about ways to think about the speech that you're writing about. So second major paper, second and final major paper in this class, you still have the homeworks and the quizzes and the videos and the kind of everyday stuff that I hope by now you're already into some sort of pattern or system of getting that done each day. But this is the second and final big paper. So you're already making good progress through this class, and I look forward to seeing what you write.